everyone. I'm Lisa Wienhold. I'm the principal flutist of the Alabama Symphony Orchestra. I'm also the flute professor at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. And I know this has been a tough year for everybody. And so I thought I would do a couple of just little tutorials for students as they prepare for the Alabama All-State auditions, which are at the end of January. So this week, today, which is January 9th, I think, I'm going to kind of go over the middle school all-state audition, and I'm hoping that this might be helpful. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the comments, and I'll try and watch those as I kind of go along. And we do this. I'm also planning on putting this up on my Facebook page as a video that you can save and go back over if you like. I will also have it on my YouTube channel, and I will make that a public setting for this as well, so that you can check there if you need to. Okay, so very first thing is, if you're considering auditioning for All-State, I am super proud of you. It's always a great thing to prepare for an audition and to take an audition. Every time I do it, and yes, I still take auditions occasionally, I get better. I get to be a better player because I'm preparing for them, and the process of auditioning also is helpful to just being a better player. It's kind of a very specialized thing to audition. It's not like playing a concert, and it's certainly not like practicing at home. However, the more that you can make your preparation, your practice, feel like the audition, and the more likewise that you can make the audition feel like your preparation and practice, the better off you'll be. So I'll talk about a few of those things at the end. To begin with here, the very first thing that I wanted to kind of talk about is what happens at the All-State auditions, because if you're a middle schooler, you may not have actually gone to one yet. If you're an old pro at it and have, great, you already know how this goes. So you will go, every district does it a little bit better about where they have it and what they do. You'll have generally a room that you'll be able to warm up in. I would counsel that you warm up more at home. Don't do a ton of getting there and playing for hours before you go to play in the scale room. You'll just wear yourself out, and probably, if you're not careful, get yourself more nervous about it all. Okay, so the first thing that you'll do is you will go to the scale room, and you will be required to play 12 major scales, the 12 major scales, 2 minor scales, and your chromatic scale. For middle school, let me see if I can get this out here. They give you a sheet, and you should print it out from the Alabama Bandmasters All-State, if you don't have it already, because it will tell you which octave. You only have to play these scales in one octave, and it'll tell which octave you need to play them in. You will need to play them from memory. They will not let you have your scale sheet in there to play them with. Let me see, they have kind of a guideline about it too. They say, they give you the scale order, which kind of follows what's called the circle of fifths. You start out with C major, which is no flats, no sharps, and you go through all of the flat keys all the way to G flat major, and at that point you kind of continue around backwards with the sharp keys. So you'll go from G flat major, which is 6 flats, to B major, which is 5 sharps, and you just kind of keep them taking away a sharp until you end up back at the end. They say the scales are to be played in eighth notes at a suggested tempo of quarter note equals 120. So hopefully you all have either on your phones as an app, or I like my old-fashioned handy-dandy metronome here, and here is 120. So eighth notes are 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and, or however you want to count them, but that's the speed that they like. Okay, now that having been said, there is absolutely no point in playing at that speed if you are not able to play at that speed. Go a little slower, it's fine. You'll still have time to get them all in, and it's much better to play them correctly a little slower than it is to try and go super fast. People always ask me, should I tongue them? Should I slur them? I don't think it much matters. Just stay consistent with what you do. Pick one or the other and stay with it. A lot of people will do slurred on the way up and tongued on the way down. Oops, that's 2 octaves. Here's 1. It's fine. I think it doesn't matter so much as it does just to make sure that you're really playing them correctly. And then of course they have written out for you. You can see the 2 minors, which are C harmonic and A melodic minor, and you may not be as familiar with those. So, and with scales, I think the way to get to where you really know them and learn them once, I see my very first flute teacher, Mrs. Nowak, Sharon Nowak is watching, and I'm sure she is laughing, because when I was a middle schooler, I was very bad about not really wanting to work on my scales either. I was all about let's play the pieces. The great thing is if you learn your scales once really well, you are good to go all the way up through every audition that you ever take. It's not like the 12 major scales change every year. They are the same scales every single time. So learn them, and then you won't have to learn them again. Now, one of the things that I tell my students to do is to learn them in batches. There are even competitions out there, I think, for learning to pi, the mathematical pi, PI, learning it out to all of like the thousands and millions of digits. And the way that people do that is that they don't memorize, 1,000 digits out. They memorize in groups of 10, 20, 30, and then know what the starting is of the next group of 10, 20, 30. So with these major scales, I would say work on C major, F, B flat, and E flat major is one group. Then this middle group, which is the tricky one, I think, A flat, D flat, G flat, and then making the turn to B major with the 5 sharps, and then the 4 sharp, E major 4 sharps, E, A, D, and G. And that way you have kind of 3 groups, like a phone number with an area code and a district code, and then the last 4 numbers. It's kind of the same idea, or a social security number. Learn them in little groups like that, and it'll be easier to do. And then of course you can kind of group together the 2 minor scales and the chromatic scale as well. Memorize them, work on them. Now I wish that they would not even put this in here, but they say that wind players must correctly play a minimum of 5 scales and their related arpeggios to qualify for all-state band. All scales must be memorized. Any student found using scale sheets during auditions will be disqualified. So what a lot of my students take from that is, great, I only need to learn 5 of them. No. Because sadly, as flute players, we play a very competitive instrument. If you don't do all of your scales and do them well, you are likely not, in many districts, not to make the even the district band, and certainly not all state. We just really, really need to know those. It's a big frustration of mine year after year. I tell the kids that my students, that they just have to know those scales, because if you don't get the minimum number of scales correctly, you don't even get to go on to the pieces. Everybody freaks out about learning the pieces and the sight reading. Get your scales. Those are the easiest points. They just memorize them once, you got them, do them every year, and you just have that, I forget what the points are, 30-some points. And that's just a gimme. So I know they're not the most fun things in the world. I still practice them, however, and involve your families. Give them a sheet and say, quiz me, pick a scale out of the air and ask me to play it. It's very helpful, I think, to learn things that are so that you know them so well that you could I could wake you up at 2 in the morning and say, play G flat major, and you would be very mad at me, but you could play G flat major at that point. You need to know them that well. The other thing I would say is I think it's very helpful to practice the arpeggios, the broken up chord, separately from the scales, because I find a lot of students stumble on those. It's easier to go in step motion up and down the scales and kind of play by feel, but the arpeggios you really need to know. So practice them differently. You can make yourself up little flashcards. There's a lot of tricks that you can use to learn those scales, but learn those scales. Okay, so I think I've, belabored that point enough. All right, so let's get to the stuff that everybody really wants to do, which are the pieces. So for the middle school, the pieces are taken out of the Rubank Advanced Method for Flute, Volume 1. You do have to, oops, things are falling out of there. You do have to have the book there, or your band director will have to have a book there. It's a good book just to have anyway. These Rubank books were put together in, I think, the 50s, the 1950s, but they're still just really good basic books. The advanced methods I really like. They even have, duets and all kinds of things in them. So the lyrical etude this year is on page 54, number 25. It's marked andantino. A lot of our musical language comes from Italian. And ino or etto or diminutives, they're called, which means less of. So whatever you see it attached to, and in this case, ino is attached to andante, so it means a little less of an andante, which means actually probably a little quicker than the slow tempo that an andante is. If you ever see an allegretto, allegro is a fast tempo, you add etto to that, and it actually means it's not quite so fast. So think of less of whatever it's attached to. The recommended marking, where did my metronome go? I put it down and now I don't know where it is. But the recommended marking is 46 to the dotted quarter note. This is in 6A. So I would recommend, at least to begin with, if you're trying to figure out how to work on it, to put the 8th note, to count the 8th note. So eventually we count in the big 6, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But to begin with, I'd count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so that you're super sure about the tempo. I'm still bothered. There's my metronome. There we go. So this brings me to the metronome thing. So when you're first learning a piece, don't try and put it on the metronome marking that they give you. It's going to be too hard to do. But I think it's very helpful to practice with the metronome. Is everybody groaning in the background? I'm betting that they are. Put it on a slower tempo. Put it on probably 8th notes at a slower tempo. It will help to keep you honest, and it will be less of a problem in the long run. I still practice with a metronome myself. Okay, so a little not quite so slow as an andante. This is in actually G minor, which is the relative minor of B flat major. Let's just talk through a few things to begin with. So with any lyrical or slow piece, I think it's super helpful to plan where you're going to breathe. I think we tend to do the breathing thing where we take a breath and it's like a gas tank. We fill the tank up and then we run out of gas at empty, and then we're stranded somewhere where we'd rather not be stranded. Take breaths early and often and plan them. I think it's one of the big problems with us flute players. We have a lot of trouble. We use a ton of air to play. We need to be planning where we're going to take the breaths, and we don't want to be totally out of breath when we're going to try and take one, because our little mammal brains, when we're out of breath, when we're running short on oxygen, that is all we can think about. And that's when we start making other mistakes, rhythmic mistakes or note mistakes or finger mistakes. Every single time I get pushed for air, I will make a mistake. It just tends to happen. So plan your breaths. In this case, I have them marked in. I take a breath at the end of the 2nd measure. I take a breath at the middle of the 4th measure. I'm going to play through and talk to these, so it'll be, you'll see, I take a breath at the end of the 1st line. I take a breath at the middle of the 3rd measure of the 2nd line, at the end of the 2nd line, and after the 1st measure of the 3rd line, and before the end, a couple of places I have both a breath that I would like to take and hope it's good enough, and then an emergency breath too. And that's after the 1st 16th note of the 2nd bar from the end of the piece, or in the middle of the bar after the D where the slur ends. And occasionally I might take both, depending. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of basically play through and talk as I play through. So one of the things that I'm a little disappointed about the all-state pieces this year, and I wish that there was more of, is chances to make some dynamic differences. In this, they don't tell you anything. So you will walk into the pieces room, which is different from the scale room. Hopefully you've aced the scale room and you're on to the room where you play your pieces, the 2 etudes, and your sight reading. And you'll start in there. Well, you see at the very first, there's a crescendo in the first measure, getting louder, and a decrescendo, getting softer. But from what? When they don't tell me, I just sort of assume that I'm going to start at kind of a mezzo forte dynamic. And especially when you're maybe a little bit nervous and maybe don't have the air going quite as much, don't try and play too soft at the beginning. Leave yourself room to make the crescendo. Don't play too loud, but don't play too softly either. Now, the second measure is an octave jump from a G to a G, which on the flute is accomplished solely with our embouchure. So be very careful about that. We're supposed to diminuendo, get softer as we go to that upper note, which is hard. But so don't try and go too softly or you're likely to be flat on that upper note. I'd rather hear you be not so soft on that last upper G and not be flat in pitch than be super soft and out of tune. Be careful that with flute players with octaves that we really do the work with our embouchure and changing the air direction to a little higher than just a really easy way to get that upper octave is just to roll in. And it sounds terrible. It's a terrible pitch. It's a terrible tone quality. So don't do that. All right, so those are the first 2 measures. So I don't have my metronome on, but I'm going to guess the tempo for the minute. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, which brings me to the point of vibrato. If you're a middle school student, you may not have learned how to play with vibrato yet. That's okay. That's fine. It's kind of a thing we add on a lot of times as we continue to study the flute. If you do play with vibrato, this is the time to go ahead and use it. It's a nice thing. It's for those of you who don't know what vibrato is, it's a little bit of the waver in the flute sound. It's a typical part of playing the flute. It's something that your teachers or your band directors can help you with, and I actually have a tutorial on it on my YouTube channel, which I'll put in a plug. You can subscribe to it. It's just under Lisa, L-I-S-A, Wienhold, W-I-E-N-H-O-L-D, and I have all kinds of little tutorials on that about how to play the flute. Okay, so going on in the third measure, we have an F sharp. Be careful, that's an accidental. It needs to carry for the whole measure. So in that third measure, you need to also play F sharp when you get to the 4th and 5th eighth notes. Watch the articulations. The slurs are under 4 notes and then 3 and then 3. Right where I quit after that B flat is where I am going to take another breath. Crescendo. This time we're going up to a higher B flat. The same thing applies as I was speaking about the G octaves. This is not an octave, but it's a bigger interval. 10th, is that right? 11th? I'm bad at doing those. In any case, you have to make a much bigger jump to get up there. Again, don't diminuendo more than you can sustain a good sound. Okay, at the end of that line, I'm going to take another breath and I'm going to go on. So in here, the articulations, I believe that it's supposed to be A and then C, B flat A under one slur, E flat D, C under one slur, B flat on its lonesome, and then I think what's meant is for the A to be then slurred to the G and the F sharp. The printing in some of the books is not good. That's what I'm going to go with. It's not going to make that much of a difference. If you want to tongue the A and then slur the G and the F sharp together, that's fine. Okay, and then we're going to take a breath, or I am anyway, after the low D. And then here's our F sharp again. You got to make sure you get that accidental in. up articulations. Now, there are dots over those 16th notes there, which are staccato. Staccato means actually separated. What you will hear a lot is staccato means short, and that is because if you are playing in a large group of people, like a band, the easiest way to get notes all separated together is to play them short. I am not a huge fan of playing notes too terribly short because I just think it's not very musical. In this case, however, for an audition, I would make a point of being pretty short on these because whoever is judging you is likely going to be looking for that. I didn't make a very good job of going from that D to the B flat. See, even the pros mess up sometimes. Little diminuendo there. Honestly, going down from the D to the B flat, it's probably going to be enough of a diminuendo just because of the range of coming down. Okay, going on, third line. G sharp is the same as A flat. So you start up the beginning of that line with an A natural and then go to an G sharp, same as A flat. I keep those notes pretty short as well. Now, here's the measure that's likely going to be a little bit tricky for most people because we have to go from a D up to a high G, and then we have high F sharp, and then pretty much beyond that, what we're coming down is a G minor arpeggio. Okay, so if you know your arpeggios, this is just my pitch for knowing your scales and arpeggios. It will help you in the long run. It's like recognizing vocabulary in a book that you're reading. You don't have to look it up to know what the word means. You know what it is. Same thing here. All right, be very careful. The high G is fingered like a regular old G, but without the thumb. High F sharp is fingered like the, harder to see here, the lower F sharp, except that you're going to pick up this middle finger. And also, this is one of the places that you cannot be on your double thumb key. You need to be on the single thumb key, because if you're on your double thumb key, that high F sharp really doesn't want to come out much better. That having been said, for a large portion of this etude, except for right there, if you're accustomed to playing on your B flat thumb key, this is a great place to use it. If you're not, don't try and tackle that at this point. I will put up, because I don't think I've done one of those, I'll put up a little video about on my YouTube channel about what's helpful for the various B flat fingerings, because that can be a big help. Okay, so you do that measure. Here's where I usually get a breath. Or here, or maybe both. At the end there, we have a little diminuendo, which again, honestly, is likely to happen pretty much anyway as you kind of go down to the from the A to the G. There's underneath that second to last measure, there's RIT, which is retard, slow down a little bit, which I think you could do even in the last about 3 beats of that measure. I don't think it has to be just on that last beat. It's a little bit of a confusing rhythm. If you break that measure down and count 16th notes, it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's like a dotted 8th and 16th note rhythm, only in this case, because it's 6/8, it's a dotted 16th and 32nd note rhythm. Okay, so I will play through and wish me luck on this, because I really should have practiced this a little bit more myself. Okay, here we go. And one of the other things I was going to say too is for whenever you're performing a piece, think to yourself a whole measure of the piece before you start, so that you're not trying to kind of create your tempo as you're starting. Just like if you were kind of starting a band and your band directors, they give you an upbeat and then down. Or they might count out 4, 5, 6, 1. Think in a tempo before you start. A lot of times I find that my students start and then somewhere around maybe the second measure they establish a tempo. And it's not because they don't know what the tempo is that they want to play, they just kind of create it in the first measure. We need to join a tempo we already kind of have clicking in our head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm going to do that. I'll count them out loud this time. In the audition, you should not do that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. voice you guys gonna give me. So I think that's about it for the lyrical one. It's actually, I think it's a really pretty little piece. It's part of the kind of the etude section of this book, but it's a really lovely little piece. Okay, moving on to our technical etude. That is on page 38 of this book, of this Rubank Advanced Method. It's a duet. It's number 18 duet. It's in 3/4 time. It's also in 2 flats, but in this case we're back into what you normally think of as 2 flats, B flat major, the major key. It says tempo di polacca, and a polacca is a dance that's in 3/4. It's not terribly fast. It's by a composer named Spohr, Louis Spohr, I think is his first name. And they have marked for this tempo for 112. To me, that's a little bit fast, even for me. Which seems fine until you get into all the 16th notes. Dia, 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 dum. Okay, so what I would advise is if you can get it worked up and play it at that tempo, super, that's great. If you can't, back it off a little bit. It will always be better to play a tempo a little bit slower and play it correctly and maybe with a little bit style. You will feel less panicked. You will feel more in control. Okay, so I think we'll just kind of talk this through as we go through. Again, I think it's not a bad idea to plan your breaths in this. Even in quicker pieces, it's a good idea to have an idea where you might want to breathe. So let's just kind of talk this through. First measure, and this happens a lot, there's a little bit of a syncopated rhythm. Syncopated means a little bit off the beat. We put an emphasis off the beat instead of on the beat. Instead of 1, 2, we do 1 and. So in this case, they even mark it. They mark a dotted a staccato on the 8th note and then an accent on the quarter note. So I would in this case play that first 8th note pretty short. Don't overly try and accent the F there. That's a range in which it's super easy to crack notes. It's really easy to do that. When I start doing that, I try and think, oh, open up and don't blow quite so hard and aim the air into the flute a little bit more. But do try and accent it a little bit, I think. E natural is next in the 16th notes. That would be for both of the E's in that measure, so look out for that. Now, here's a place that I might grab a breath, just so that I have enough breath to get through to the end of the line. If you're going quick enough, you may not need it. But if I was going to take a breath, I would probably take it before this high F. You could probably sneak it after the 8th note high F too, but I think before it is a little bit better. Now we're into the 16th notes. Here we have coming down in 2s. So you're repeating the second of each 2-note slur to start the beginning of the next one. So tongue the beginning of each slur very clearly. However, I prefer, unless you're making a big stylistic choice to do this, to not what I call clip, rivet the 2-note slurs. I hear this a lot when students play 2-note slurs. Rivet, 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 rivet. Blow through that second note of the slur. It doesn't, unless they've really specifically marked that they want that second note of the slur short, it does not need to be short, my opinion. But I'm in charge today, so that's what we're going to do. So instead, sustain the second note and then tongue the first of the next slur really clearly. I did that wrong. Okay. Now, in this measure, we have those little squiggles over the G's in the measure. Those are called mordents. A mordent is an ornament. It's like a trill. It's actually a very shortened trill. It just means you play the note above it in the key, and back to the note quickly. So it's a very short trill. Instead of doing G to A as a bunch of trills, you just do. So that measure is. They'll sound sometimes almost like a little triplet. Dum, diddle-a-dum, diddle-a-dum. That's fine. Be careful when you start adding in, and this is any ornament, trills, trills or mordents or turns, that you don't change the rhythm in doing the ornament. So I would practice that measure without them first, then practice the ornament, then add it all together. Then kind of goes back to something just like the beginning, the second line. Again, remember your E naturals, go for the whole measure. Here's where I would take my next breath. Breath. Now, they have told you to start forte at the beginning. I would just play with a nice full sound. I would not, try and blast necessarily. However, here's a place where they do the diminuendo where it's nice, it's pretty easy to kind of get softer as you're coming down. Then make a nice crescendo going up. I love it when they write it and they make it easy for me to make the dynamics happen. So you can make that crescendo as you go up. Just be aware of it and do it. Same thing coming down here with the 2-note slurs. Now, if you have been on your B flat thumb key for up till here, which is a lovely idea, you're going to have to get off of it at some point. What I would do, depending on your ability to slide around, is either slide off of it on the A, which is a little bit of a gamble, or as you come down you might want to use the 1 and 1 B flat. So that you're back on your, to be able to play the B natural. Then you've just been on a C. When you come back down, you can go right back down to the B flat thumb key, going up the scale. Again, I take a breath. Same problem here. So whatever you did before, do that. Now, in this last group of run of 16ths going up, be super careful. It's a little tricky because it looks like a scale, but you will notice you go from an F to an A, not an F to a G, an F to an A. If you do that run correctly, you're going to be probably ahead of about, I guess, a good 25% of people, because a lot of people are not going to be careful looking at that and they're just going to run up the scale. Okay, going on with the next line. They don't put a dot over the high F, but I probably would make it on the shorter side. All of these syncopated rhythms, whether you end a slur with them or in this case you tongue it, I think they're probably meant to be a little on the shorter side. Just don't do it so short that you mess up the rhythm as you go. Then going on. Second ending, just forget about that first ending. And I'd probably play those last 3 notes a little bit on the shorter side too. Again, they don't have dots over them, but I think it fits in the style of the piece. Okay, so I will play through this, and again, wish me luck about this. Again, count in your head. Count 1, 2, 3. Da, ba, da, da, dum, ba, da, dum. I'm not going to play it at 112. I don't like it at 112, but if you need to and you want to work it up that way for the All-State, that's great. Just if you're going to play it at 112, play it well at 112. I would rather hear it at 104 or 108 correctly and with some style than 112, just because you can play it at 112 and rush through it. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to count it out loud for this time to give you guys an idea. If you're doing this in the audition, do not count out loud. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Now, I forgot one other thing, and I just did it this way too. To me, it seems like you should slur into the last measure of the piece, but it's not marked. it's marked, it's both notes, all three notes are tongued in the last piece. However, the slur goes over into the downbeat of the first one. I don't think it's a big deal to do either. Probably you should tongue it, which I just didn't do there. Is probably what you should do, but I don't think it's a big deal to do either. That's a minor fault, as they say, if a fault at all. Okay, so you've gotten through your two pieces. Hopefully they've gone swimmingly. We're going to talk about kind of some strategies just generally about auditions in a minute. And then you will come to the thing that everybody always freaks out about, which is sight reading. I am telling you, don't freak out about sight reading. That's easy to say, right? And a whole lot less easy to do. I love to sight read, which makes me the biggest weirdo on the planet, I understand. The reason I love to sight read is because it's not something that you've been given to prepare. And so if you are given a piece to prepare and it doesn't sound very good, I always tend to think, well, if I put in a little bit more time working on it, maybe it would sound better. This is just to kind of, with sight reading, I just feel like it's a freebie. I'm going to do the best I can, and that's going to have to be good enough at the one pass through that I have of it. However, a few little things about sight reading. They will likely, here, let me grab the piece that I picked out today. What did I pick? Yeah, it's hard to see. I picked number 2. Right here on this page. I wish there was a way on Zoom, there's a way for me to share the screen so you can see it. There's not a way for me to do this, I don't think, on FaceTime Live. Somebody will have to tell me if there is. Okay, so sight reading, I see this all the time. You get 30 seconds or a minute or however long they decide to give you to look at it. The music is put in front of you and all of a sudden I see this going on. And it's this mad dash to get through it and finger through it madly and all of that stuff. Okay, and that's fine. However, depending on the length of the piece, this is super short. It's only 4 measures, so you probably do have time to even do it a few times there. Generally, the pieces are going to be around 20, maybe 30 measures long, depending on what they are. Try and have a little bit of a plan. Just stop, take a deep breath, go through a checklist. The first thing I tell people is look at the time signature, and if they give you a tempo marking, a descriptive one, andante, allegro, adagio, which you should start to learn what those are, because if a piece is marked adagio, A-D-A-G-I-O, and you go flying through it, that is not good, because that is a slow tempo, and you are wrong. You should be playing it slowly. Most sight reading pieces for Allstate are going to fall in the moderate tempo. They're not going to ask you to play something super fast or something super slow, but it is good to know those things so that you are prepared when you see them. Occasionally you will see a quarter note or quarter note equals a metronome marking, MM equals, that's metronome marking, and then they should give you a rhythmic value, a quarter note or an eighth note or something equals however many beats. And that's beats per minute. That's what that translates into. So if it's MM equals 60, that means that there are 60 beats per minute, one every second. 120, which is a march tempo, is 2 beats per second. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so look at that first. In this case, I'm going to do it for you. You can't see it, but it's 4/4 time, and there is no tempo marking. So given that, I'm going to go, well, I'm just going to try a kind of a moderate tempo. Next thing is look at the key signature. In this case, there are 3 flats, B flat, E flat, A flat, which means it could either be in the major key of E flat or it could be in a minor key of C minor. Most of the time, I think your sight reading, especially for middle school, is likely to be probably in a major key. In any case, just think to yourself, not only, oh yeah, 3 flats. Think what those 3 flats are, or 2 sharps, or whatever the key signature is. Think B flat, E flat, and A flat. And then one of the things that I also make sure that I do is I really think about whatever the last flat in the key is. So in this case, B flat, E flat, A flat. Because for whatever reason, that last accidental in the key signature, that's the one that most people will miss. You'll get your B flats and E flats, and then you'll miss the A flats. if we were in the key of A flat and the flats were B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, man, you'd get the B flat, E flats, and A flats, but you'd forget about the D flats. Just be careful about that. And even a lot of times I'll tell students, look for the first time that that last flat shows up. In this case, it's the fourth measure of the piece that I'm going to be ready that that's an A flat. Okay, then you might want to just kind of take, at that point, sort of what I call a macro scan. Look over the whole piece. Because if you start madly fingering at the beginning of the piece and the hardest part is the last two measures, you are sunk when you get to those last two measures. Or there might be something that's a little bit weird rhythmically in the middle of the piece, and if you take a second and figure that out, you're going to know what it is when you get there rather than just kind of madly fingering through. That having been said, if you get all of those, do those checklists of tempo, time signature, key signature, and a macro scan, at that point, yeah, feel free to, finger through. Try not to do the blowy thing because the adjudicator, the judge, is going to hear that, and if you're doing stuff wrong when you're doing that, as hard as we try to not have that influence us, it's going to. Okay, so now here comes the part that everybody has, I think, the most trouble with sight reading, and that is do not stop. I don't care if you make a mistake. Sight reading is about playing from the beginning of the piece through to the end of the piece. Do not stop and fix mistakes. Sometimes if you stop and fix a mistake, it's going to point out that you made a mistake. We're human too, judges are human too. If I'm sort of daydreaming when I should be listening and you play straight through, I'll go, oh, gosh, did she play an A natural there instead of A flat? You know what, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt, but if you stop and change the note, I'm going to, oh yeah, she played a wrong note. Don't do that. Keep going. The other idea that generally we're checking with sight reading is to see what your general skill level is about all kinds of things. Rhythm and sound and articulations and notes and all of that kind of stuff. So when you're playing through a piece, if I'm in my orchestra and I'm playing through a piece and I play a wrong note, I don't get to say, whoa, everybody stop. I want to fix that A flat there. That should have been an A flat and I played an A natural. We have a joke in the orchestra that if anybody makes the rehearsals last longer than they should by doing something silly like stopping and asking a question that doesn't need to be asked or something like that, you owe bringing donuts for the whole orchestra to the next service. So don't end up owing donuts because you stopped somewhere. I will grade someone who makes a mistake but keeps going higher than I will grade someone that stops and fixes the mistake. Now, I may be alone in that, but I don't think I'm that alone in that. Just keep going. And the more that you practice doing that, the better you will get at doing that, at just playing through things. So, again, before you start the piece, sometimes they're going to give you a tempo to play with. When we do honor bands at UAB, I am told as a judge to count off the tempo so that they know that it's 1, 2, 3, 4. I think different all-state judges do it a little bit differently. If you get to pick your own tempo, pick one that seems reasonable, but pick a little bit on the slower side. Nerves will always send you a little faster than you mean to. So as I said, this one is in 4/4. I've scanned through. I think I'm good to go. So I'm going to give it a try. You don't know what it is, but I'm going to give it a try. 1, 2, again, don't count out loud, but I'm going to count for you all. Count this in your head. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I played that perfectly, so I'm going to pat myself on the back. Now, when you're sight reading and playing things, there's sort of a hierarchy of what's most important. Rhythms are most important because if you play the correct rhythms, you're going to be at the same place as everybody else in an ensemble, even if you play a wrong note. So rhythm is first important, always, period, ever. From now on until the end of time, rhythm is most important. Make sure you count correctly. Second most important is trying to play the right notes. Play the notes in the key, watch for accidentals. When you've done your scan through, if you see an accidental at the beginning of the measure, first thing I do is go, oh, look at that. That's a B natural at the first part of the measure. Are there any other Bs that I will also need to make a natural in the measure? The next most important thing is articulations. Are you going to follow the slurs and the tonguing that's marked? That's important too. but it's less important than the rhythm or the notes. The last thing, if all in a perfect world and everything is going swimmingly, pay attention to expressive markings. Are there dynamics? Are there crescendos and decrescendos? Are there tempo changes? Is there an accelerando mark somewhere? ACCEL means accelerando, means speed up. Is there a retard? RIT, or which is short for RITARD, retard, or rallentando, RALLENTANDO. It's spelling bee time too. So, and try and play it musically. I mean, a lot of times these sight reading things are a little funky because they're meant to be testing for sight reading, so they might have some weird notes in it. Here, I'll play you the next one of these, which is in 3/4, has some accidentals, and so it sounds a little weird. So 1, 2, 3. Not the most musical piece, but you do what you can with it. Both of these little sight reading pieces I just played have rests in them. I would say one of the biggest mistakes that people make both in their prepared pieces and in sight reading especially is they skip over the rests. We just don't think they're important. Don't do that, because then again you're rhythmically in the wrong place. Think the beat in your head, like the one that I just played, what has a bunch of quarter notes with some quarter note rests. Think note, rest on 2, note, note, 1, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Make sure that you pay attention to those. Okay, so let's talk about some just general strategies about auditioning in general. First of all, the more you do it, sorry, I get my cheat sheet up here, the more you do it, the better you will get at it. When you're preparing for auditions, try and practice auditioning. Drag mom, dad, sister, dog, cat, parakeet. Drag them in and say, hey, can you listen to me play my audition? First of all, they're going to love it that you're playing for them. That's what families do, although maybe not little sisters or little brothers or big sisters or big brothers. But parents, grandparents are going to totally love it. And you will be surprised even what just deciding to play for someone like that will make you do nerves-wise. If you have buddies in the band that you're in or that play another instrument or play the same instrument, practice for them. Go, hey, why don't you play your all-state audition for me? Or, hey, let's practice our scales. The more that you practice putting yourself in a position that feels like an audition, the more comfortable the audition is going to feel. Practice in different rooms. I like to practice in rooms that are a little bit on the deader side acoustically because they really make me hear everything that I'm doing and make sure that I'm not doing anything too funky or too crazy. Bathrooms are fun to play in because it sounds so nice and reverberant, but you can't really hear very well. That having been said, you might be in a room for your audition that's very live, we call it, that has a lot of reverberation. Unlikely, because most of the time I think the all-state auditions are at schools where there are classrooms and they don't tend to be too live. But play in different rooms. Don't just always play in your bedroom at home, because when you play through the audition somewhere else, it's going to feel different. It just is. Different rooms are different. Every one of our phones these days, which I don't have here, but I'm quite sure almost all of you have a phone or a parent with a phone, a cell phone, smartphone. It has a little app on it, every single one, a voice memo app. That recording app on there is great. It's fine. The quality is fine. Record yourself, even just kind of pressing that record button and playing through those pieces or playing through those scales. Anything that kind of puts you in a position where you feel like you're not just messing around and you can stop and fix things if you want to. Do something like that. Let's see, what else? As far as sight reading, it's hard to practice sight reading unless you've got somebody listening to you to point out what you did wrong or right. There's some great online resources, though. There's the sightreadingfactory.com, I think, and Smart Music. Smart Music is a great resource for every student. It has a lot of our individual repertoire on it and accompaniments to pieces and all of that stuff. And they also have a section for sight reading. I believe that it's about $25 for a year subscription for students. Well worth it. Save up your pennies and get that. Let's see. Oh, for the scales, you can't bring in a scale sheet. You have to just play them by memory. For the actual audition, you can bring in your own music to play off of, and I encourage you to do that. You can write little, I call it lining up my ducks. I list a little thing at the beginning of every piece. What do I need to specifically pay attention for? Remember to take the breath in the third line, or, A flats. Remember your A flats. Just to have something to kind of ground yourself and think about things. Sometimes when I'm trying to prepare for auditions, one of the things that happens sometimes when we get nervous is we get our hearts up, race a little bit, adrenaline gets going, fight or flight. We maybe don't have quite as much air as we like, so in order to practice doing that at home, I will, I don't have stairs in this house. In my old house I had stairs. I'd run up and down the flight of stairs real quick and then try and sit down or stand and play my audition. Here I'll just make a quick walk around the block and then come in and immediately try and play. It's not exactly the same as being nervous and playing an audition, but it will give you a little bit of a feel for what that's like. Let's see. This is a little new agey, try and visualize what playing the audition will feel like. Especially if you've auditioned before, you may know what it feels like. You'll go into a room, they will not see you. You will be behind a partition or a curtain. So, and I love that because it could be anybody. You're just a number to them. And if I have a bad day, oops, number 25 had a bad day. That's how it goes. And by the way, all of us, every single one of us who's a musician has had a bad day playing. We've had good days playing, we've had bad days playing, we've had good auditions, we've had bad auditions, and often we are not very good judges of what those are. Sometimes but I certainly have played auditions for professional orchestras where I thought, well, that stunk, and I go pack up my stuff and I'm heading out when they say, well, you've advanced to the next round, you need to stick around. And one personnel manager, who's the one who comes and tells you, I said, really? Because I was super surprised because I didn't think I played very well. But I played well enough to get to the next round, and I was not a good judge. So practice the auditionings. Pick up sometimes if you have a safe place to leave your flute out, and this is a little dicey because I do want you to be cleaning out your flute and putting it away. But if you have the top of a dresser where siblings, a cat, a dog can't get to it, maybe leave it out on a Saturday and practice a little bit, and then go watch the football game, and then come back and try playing through the audition cold. That will a lot of times give you a good read on what it's going to feel like to actually audition. Just like I was saying with sight reading, when you play the audition, do not stop. I don't care if you made a mistake. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Practice things with a metronome. Sometimes just playing with a metronome at a different tempo will feel weird, and you'll get a feel for kind of how you might feel when you might be a little bit nervous about it. Okay, so just some general things about the day of. And I'm going to sound like your mother or your grandmother or your dad or whoever. Take care of yourself. Try and get a good night's sleep beforehand. Eat well. I would not carb load. I wouldn't eat a great big bowl of spaghetti and then go try and play. I often have a banana an hour or so before I play, or some yogurt. Just you'll know what works for you, and you'll find that over the years of doing it. I don't think it's a great idea to go play on an empty stomach. That doesn't mean you need to eat right before you play, but eat something that's good for you. Don't down 5 Snickers bars and then go try and play. When you get there and there's a place to warm up, I usually try and tell my students, don't try and go, everybody, for some reason all the flutes group together in a clump in the room, and the trumpets are over in another clump and all of that. It's not that helpful. You're just going to hear a lot of people around you playing the same stuff that you're going to play, and it's hard to concentrate. When I used to do stuff like that, I would go and try and find the tuba players and the trombone players because they're just real chill. And they're back there, and honestly, they're usually making jokes that are sort of inappropriate amongst themselves about bodily functions. But you're not having to listen to every other flute player in the world playing through stuff. It's easy to get swayed by what you're hearing. People playing through things way too fast. I guarantee you would probably hear some people doing this in the technical aid too. That's too fast and it's stupid. But if you hear that, you might, as a young player, I often did that. I heard somebody playing There's a flute piece called Peter and the Wolf, which, you know, it's fast, but I was in an audition, and in the room next to me, I heard somebody doing this. And I thought, oh, I picked the wrong tempo. I better try and play it at that tempo. Well, I've since learned that's a dumb tempo to try and play it at, A. B, I was not prepared to play it at that tempo, so when I tried to play it at that tempo, it was a mess. So play your own game. Do your own thing. If you're playing it slower or faster than somebody else, that's fine. That's what you're doing that day. And then just a lot of deep breaths before you play anything is going to help. It just kind of are calming. They calm our nervous system, all of that. Take some deep breaths and give it a go. Now, once you're done, one of the things I do like to have people do is when you're done playing for the day, your audition, take just a few minutes and write a few notes to yourself. What did I do that I wish I hadn't done? And then alternately, what did I do that was pretty good? We're all super good at picking what we could make better. We are not very good at remembering what we did that was good. I train dogs for a hobby, and if you look at, like, I'll get this wrong, but a lot of the behavioral stuff they say is good behavior unrewarded is extinguished, which means if you never tell a dog that what they're doing is right, they go, oh, I don't know, maybe that wasn't right. So tell yourself what you did right too. I got that run that I never get. I didn't run out of breath where I usually do. I played with a good sound that day. And probably most importantly at the end of it, I took an audition, and that's a hard thing to do, and it will make me a better player, and not only a better flute player, it will also serve me well in many other aspects of my life. Learning to audition has made me a much better person when I go in for a job interview. It's made me be able to speak in front of people and not get so terribly nervous. It's an excellent skill, and it will make you a better player. We all want to make Allstate or whatever the audition is for. Certainly there's an outcome that we all wish for, but you will get a lot out of just having made the attempt at it. And every time that you audition, you will learn something that will hopefully you'll take into the next audition that will make you better at the next audition. So I think I've probably nattered at you way longer. Look, I made it almost an hour of yakking at you. So I hope that this has been a little bit helpful. I will save this on my Facebook page, so you should be able to go to it. I'll make it a public setting so you can tell your friends, family, etc. They can learn everything about Allstate flute excerpts that they never wanted to know. I will also put this on my YouTube channel, and I have a few tutorials on there which I had done for my students that were private, and I will make those public about how to kind of work through each of these little etudes. So happy auditioning. I'm proud of you all. Give yourself a pat on the back for auditioning. It's hard to do. And best of luck. Bye.